What does Miami do in the upcoming draft? What's going on with Bam Adebayo's contract? And should the Heat have tanked this past season? We open up the mailbag to answer these questions about Miami's offseason and more in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil, both of us credentialed Heat media members, and excited about today's show. It's brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're opening up the mailbag today to get to some of your offseason questions. We've got questions about tanking, some potential under-the-radar trade targets, but let's start with this one. A lot of draft analysts believe that Miami's priority in the draft will be a guard, while a lot of fans I've talked to think that the Heat just need size. What do you think the front office prioritizes, and then what about you? What would we prioritize? So let's start with the front office part of it, David.
Yeah, it's tough to gauge. I think they're honestly, I don't know. I don't want to say that they're not focusing on the draft when clearly that's the case, and I'm sure that they have their priorities in place. But I don't think they're looking at it so singularly as we need a wing, we need a guard, we need a center. I think they're just looking for the right fit, the right player, and somebody who is ready to contribute. My thought would be right away. I've changed course on that because my thought originally had been that they might look to take a developmental project the same way that Niko Jovic was a developmental project a couple seasons ago, and then they took a much more ready-made player in Jaime Jaquez. I think at this point in time, they're probably looking for somebody who can just step right in, given that, as we talked about recently in an episode with Michael Scotto of Hoopsite, the reality is that Haywood Highsmith and Caleb Martin might not be on this roster and likely won't be on this roster. So they need to kind of start shoring up that talent pool as quickly as possible. They can't afford to have a guy kind of just stash on the bench the way that Jovic did for a couple seasons. I think they need somebody who can come in and play right away. So they're probably looking for the best player available, whomever that might be at number 15 and 43.
They have depth needs all over this roster. They could use a backup point guard, right? DeLon Wright, Patty Mills, they're free agents too. They can use a backup point guard. They can use backup wings now that Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith are free agents. We'll see what happens there. And they can use a backup center because Thomas Bryant can opt out and Orlando Robinson isn't exactly proven and Kevin Love's going to be 36 years old. Like, they need everything. This team, and they can't really be picky. And the other part about this, they're picking number 15. Like, they have no idea who's going to be there on the board. They're going to have guards on their draft board. They're going to have the centers on their draft board. They're going to have wings. They're going to have whoever's highest on the board when they get there to number 15, the player that they might want. Like, if we're talking about an immediate contributor, like one of the names that always gets bounced around is Devin Carter, right?
Yep.
He might not be there at 15. He might get picked at 12. I think ESPN had him going 12 or 13 in their latest mock draft. So it's like, okay. So if the guy that you thought was the most NBA ready gets drafted 2, 3, 4 picks ahead of you, then you just sort of left what, and that could end up being a developmental prospect. They said, like, hey, you know what? The 3 guys that we thought could contribute right away, well, they got picked. So let's go with this other guy who we are really high on, but might be a little bit more draft and stash, might not be ready to contribute right away. So that's ultimately where this is going to be. And so you're right. You can't be black and white about it. You can't just only have guards on your big board. You can't only have centers on your big board. You got to have all of them, right? You got to rank them. Right. And then you just sort of, and the other thing with Miami is they don't really move in the draft. They don't move up and down to go get their guy. They tend to historically stay where they are and get the best guy available. Yeah.
I mean, you look at Hawkins probably went a little bit earlier than expected. Tyler went a little earlier than expected. Bam went a little earlier than expected. I mean, this is kind of how they operated. So, I mean, right now, if you're looking at mock drafts and where a lot of experts might have some players, probably somebody that's in the 18 to 25 range might actually be somebody that Miami is just really high on. Ooh. And that's who they'll take. And it could be. It could be. And I mean, I know that you got put it recently. You were pretty giddy about the idea that maybe he had canceled some workouts because he might have a promissory note.
Yeah.
So somebody's already taking him. It might be the Heat, although I don't think they've ever done that throughout their draft history. So it would be
They
amazing
wouldn't.
if this was the player.
When I wrote the right, yeah, I was like, maybe they're even higher on Holmes than I am. Like, hey, he's the missing piece, man. Like, no, because even when they drafted Jaime, they felt really good about the fact that he would be there and that they were going to take him if he was there. And I remember talking to Jaime for that story I wrote for the Ringer, and even his dad and him were like, yeah, we didn't hear diddly squat from Miami. They don't tell us anything. We thought that they liked us just based on how the workout went well. We were there, like we know it went well, but we had no idea whether or not they were going to take us.
So I don't want to burst a lot of bubbles out there because I know a lot of people are just, again, looking at so singularly as center or wing or guard. Miami is probably going to make whatever decision they feel most comfortable with. And it probably won't be somebody that you have in the kind of 15-ish range. You know, if you're a listener, you know, it's not going to be just a center. They're not going to take the best center that's there at 15. They're going to take the player that they think is best for them. And they might make a mistake, but given the track history of this team, they're going to feel pretty comfortable about it, and they're probably going to make the right choice.
This next question comes from ZepFan82, writes in, saw this in an Ask Ira column, but wanted to get your guys' take on it. Why is there so much talk about Jimmy's contract extension and hardly anything about Bam's? Is his extension just a foregone conclusion? Well, it's a foregone conclusion that Bam is going to get the extension.
Yeah.
He's going to get the max extension. What we don't know is what that max is going to be worth necessarily. And when he's going to sign it, because he's extension eligible this year, and it would be 3 years, $165 million. But it could have been he could have been eligible for 4 years, 245, had he made an All NBA team, which of course he didn't.
Right.
He doesn't have to sign. Jimmy Butler doesn't have to sign his extension either right now, and that's why Pat Riley says we could do it next year. Jimmy Butler obviously has a lot more of a reason to get this thing done now, is because he's just on the other side of his his basketball prime. Probably, he's getting older. Bam is just getting into his prime. There's really no rush, and I actually think it makes more sense for Bam to wait, because if he does next year make an All-NBA team, then he does unlock that All-NBA language and can get to that 4-year, $245 million. So I think that's mostly why we're not talking about it as much, not to mention that there's not all the drama and circumstances going on with him as there is with Jimmy Butler. But that's really why it's more kind of quiet. It's just the Heat would love to sign him to an extension. It's really up to Bam whether or not it makes sense for him to sign it this summer or wait, try to make All-NBA next year and go for it next summer.
Right. And this happened when Bam signed his last extension too. It was like, oh, is he going to sign it or not? And then there was very little buzz, and then they offered it at the very first moment that they possibly could, and he signed it right away. And I think also, if you're looking at it from the fans' perspective, the reason why it's not as polarizing a topic is because, and I think Ira did a really good job of answering this in his column, I think, Jimmy's so much older, and the idea of paying him that sum of money is what has a lot of people, fans and the front office, kind of concerned, especially given what we saw from him this past season, where he missed a lot of games and he wasn't available. Miami was once again a playing team. So I know that there are a lot of people who have concerns about Bam's ceiling and whether or not he's going to be a star, or whether or not he is a star currently. You and I both agree that he is a star level player, despite the fact that he doesn't put up gaudy offensive numbers. He does so many other things that makes his value incomparable. At the same time, I think that's the concern is, can you afford to pay this guy? Well, the Heat don't have those concerns. They would gladly pay him whatever money he's asking for.
Look across the NBA. You have max players and you don't. You don't really have guys negotiating something like less than the max unless they're doing something specific, the way that D-Wade, LeBron, and Chris Bosh did to try to bring Udonis Haslem back and whatever. Like most of the time, these max guys just get the max money. That's it. Period. Yeah. Bam's a max player.
Yep.
All right. We're going to move on to our next mailbag questions. We're going to talk about what Miami getting swept in the playoffs means for their future. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are just right for the role. And that's why you've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They've got the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It can be so time-consuming, taking all those resumes, sorting through them, finding time to schedule interviews. You're back and forth, sending email, phone calls, whatever. Don't worry about that. Don't even deal with that kind of a hassle. LinkedIn does it all for you. But they're not just another job board. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. That's what makes it the best place to hire somebody, because it gives you access to professionals you won't find anywhere else. And they do all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get qualified candidates within 24 hours, less than a day. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, they might not have the time or resources to hire, and that's why they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Yours should be next. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply, but we'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We're on the road to 14,000 subscribers. We're almost there. Get us there. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on your podcast app, 5-star ratings and reviews. Always appreciated. Our next question, with Miami basically getting swept in the playoffs, isn't this season the proof you need that sometimes tanking is the better option? David, I know you feel strongly about tanking.
You asked me a question similar to this. I can't recall exactly how you phrased it, but if you could know ahead of time whether or not, I forgot exactly how you phrased it. This was like a month or so ago. If you knew that you were basically going to get swept by the Celtics or something to that effect, do you remember asking me a question along those lines? Yeah, it was one of your theoreticals, and I can't recall this, but I mean, to the question we received regarding this actual season, like, no, and I think this is the worst year where tanking would have done whatever idea you think that tanking accomplishes, which is to get a better draft pick or put yourself in a position to get a better draft pick. Like, of all the years where you may have tanked to get a better place in a draft order, a draft that is widely considered to be mediocre, at best, this is not the time to do it. And I've look, I've said this many times. I don't think tanking works. I think it's bad karma. I think it sets a bad precedent. I just think that the idea of willingly embracing losing as a front office has a trickle-down effect. From the player's perspective, like, we've seen even a team like the Miami Heat that we know prioritizes winning, like, even when they get some fresh blood like Kevin Love or something like that, there's like a rejuvenation, DeLon Wright, etc. Like, you feel something by knowing that the front office kind of, quote unquote, has your back, that they're trying to do what they can to put themselves in a position to win. To see the exact opposite taking place, and to have your coach kind of take you out in key moments, kind of take you out of a rhythm because they were trying to purposely lose games, that cannot be a positive thing for any player that is hardwired to win at all costs. So I totally hate the idea of tanking. This past season, as bad as a gentleman's sweep was at the hand of the Celtics, I still don't think it would have been the right idea, especially with this upcoming draft and everything. Like what would have been the difference? Had they missed the play-in tournament completely? Had they missed getting swept by the Celtics? Like, they get the 10th pick in the draft instead of the 15th pick? Would that really have helped Miami's future? I don't know. I don't think it would have.
It's impossible to know, right? I mean, you look at a team like Dallas, who did tank at the end of the season with this exact scenario. They had decided, you know what? We're not good enough.
We want to be in a play-in.
Yeah. We're not good enough to win the championship this year. So what's even the point of going to the playoffs? And it was kind of gross when they did it, and it was very blatant. Yep. But what happened? They ended up getting Derek Lively, who's one of the most important players in their draft, because they moved up a few more picks, and they ended up they ended up getting this player who is a key part of a team that is now in the NBA Finals and looks like a big part of their future, obviously. So, I disagree with you that tanking just fundamentally doesn't work. I wouldn't have done it this year. I don't care about this draft. It's not very good, and I don't think that there's a real difference between picking 10, 12, and 15 in this draft. I think the boards are all over the place and whatever. But in terms of a tanking as a concept, as of being an option, it should be. We kind of in the Miami Heat media space, we say, well, the Heat will never do it, so it's no point in talking about it. I'm like, I'm okay talking about it as like an idea. And the Heat, for all of the winning and all of the success and all of the stuff and all of the culture, the only time they've ever actually won the championship was when they had Dwayne Wade, a guy they picked in the top 5 of the draft. The Alonzo Mourning years, all that stuff, even this, None of it actually led to a title. The only time they ever won anything of ring was when they did it with the guy that they picked in the top of the draft. That's
Yeah,
it. They never did it
but
before. What?
no, you're right. But I mean, you're also looking at an 8-year gap in between Miami getting Pat Riley in 1995 and 2003 when they drafted Dwayne. Like, I mean, you look at their drafts in between, then they were always in the playoffs. So they didn't even have a lottery pick until
That's the
2002
point.
when they
And that's why
selected
you
Caron
tank.
Butler.
Is to get that
So
high
you're
pick, right? That's the idea of tanking. Is we need like it's fine to find a guy at 15 and 18 and whatever, and these diamonds in the roughs
Sure.
and all this.
Sure,
But
sure.
if you want the top talent that wins championships, those players tend to get picked at the top 5 of the draft. Now you could find your Giannis and your Nikola Jokic, and hopefully, if you're Miami,
Yeah.
you one day get lucky, and that's the idea. And I'm not arguing that the Heat need to tank to go get that player. I think that there's a lot of evidence that you don't need to be, but the odds are tremendously better in the top 5 than they are finding the next Nikola Jokic in the second round during a Taco Bell commercial. And so
Yeah.
it's that's why I think we shouldn't just
Great moment
dismiss
in
it as
NBA
something that
history.
doesn't work. You know what I mean?
You're right. Maybe that absolute line of thinking probably doesn't apply. I think it doesn't work like 90% of the time, though. I really don't. Like, I mean, the Orlando Magic,
What
a
does?
team that had a top 5 pick.
You know what I mean? Like it's as good an
You're right.
option as
Yeah.
anything else. Free agency's shot.
Yeah.
It's not even a real thing anymore. So you
Yeah, maybe.
trading for there. If you could trade for a superstar player, that's the best way to do it. Hey, ready-made superstar, go get him. Obviously, that's the best thing. You can go get LeBron. You can go get do
Chris
it.
Bosh.
Yeah, you trade for these players. But if you can't, and free agency is not an option, right? Because players just don't top players don't
Take
enter
the
free
money.
agency anymore.
They take the money. They take the extension.
what's
and
your
then they
option?
request a trade. Yeah.
None of these options are work all the time. If there was one option that worked 90% of the time, everybody would just do that. So I think it's as good as an option as anything else. I really do.
I think the draft is going to be increasingly more watered down. You might get lucky like the Mavs did with Derek Lively, but even then, like you're talking about a backup center who's provided a spark against a particular team in Minnesota, but I don't think he's been like an ultimate game changer. Ultimately,
I
what
disagree.
really has helped him
He's been awesome for
the
them.
few moments, okay, they've been good against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like I think he's been fine. Like I mean, again, I think
All
the spark
season.
that
I mean, he's not the reason they're in the finals, but he is a key member of their rotation. You know, that's all I'm saying. They drafted
fine.
Luka. We could
fine.
use that. They drafted Luka they traded for
Fifth.
Luka. Technically, the Hawks traded,
fifth, right.
drafted Luka. Third, fourth.
Was it?
No, third, fourth, whatever. Top 5.
I think, yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
don't
just-
know.
I don't
Aaron
think we
Gordon
can
was
dismiss
a
it.
5th overall pick too.
Yeah.
And he didn't thrive until he was in Denver.
okay.
There's just sometimes it's hit and miss. Like you
Sure.
can get good contributors, but I think it's more important to kind of just lean into winning than it is into tanking.
We're not
Personally.
disagreeing on that. But if, the way they got Dwayne Wade was sort of this freak occurrence with the Alonzo Mourning stuff, and then everything happened, and then it
Sure.
was like really hard to bounce back. I mean, even the way they got Bam was basically because LeBron left and this team, and then the Chris Bosh stuff happened, like all this like freak
That's
stuff.
what it was.
And
Yeah.
so this is not an organization that's going to say, all right, scrap it all. We're going to waste a season. Like we know that they're not going to do that. But some of the best draft picks that they've ever made were based on surprisingly disappointing seasons. And so the silver lining of that is you get Dwayne Wade and you get Bam Adebayo. It worked. Like that part works, or it has, I should say. There's other years where it ends up being Justice Winslow, right? Like it doesn't always work. But,
Or Michael Beasley.
every star player basically has been drafted. A lot of other players have gotten drafted too, but every star player in the league has gotten drafted.
Jimmy Butler was drafted late in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, you can find him everywhere. I'm just saying the odds tend to be better at the top of the draft, and that's where Miami got their
I think that's
ultimate
going to
star.
change. I think that's going to change.
We're already
ultimately.
seeing it
Like, I
change
really
a little
do.
bit, but I do think
Over
most
time,
of the time,
for the next 5-10 years, you'll probably see less and less star players at the top of the draft and more just coming from all over the place because it's especially with the one and done system. Like I don't know how you've got
now
guys
you got
that
the
are
high
basically
school
hyped
thing
up.
is happening again.
Yeah,
It's gonna
just-
and we have all these leagues. I still think that generally the odds will be better at the top of the draft, but maybe we'll start seeing more kind of stars pop up from different places in the draft the way that we didn't see either. Also, the way we saw with Giannis and Jokic. I think that those are that's very instructive. All right. We went long on that one. Let's take a break here, and then we're going to talk about forgetting the trade machine, forgetting the salary cap, all that mumbo jumbo. That's too confusing. Just go get the best player possible. Who would that player be? We'll talk about that next.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your car alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Everydayers, tune in later this week when we open up the blue notebooks again and look at some of the forwards and wings that could be available for the Miami Heat at number 15. If you think tanking is a viable option, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think about tanking. Does it go against Heat culture? Should they try it? Should other teams try it? Whatever you think. Let's get to this next question. Forget the trade machine, salary cap, anything else. Done. All if it's forgotten. If there's one player that could take this roster and make them a champion, who would it be? So how are you taking the? Are just all the players? Or are we just talking about like free agents, currently players that are available? Or are we just like going all Madden fantasy draft style on this?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of the idea here. Is like even if you keep the roster as currently constructed, maybe even without whatever free agents they have, Haywood, Caleb, Patty Mills, etc.
Okay, so just guys under contract right now.
Looking up at the core roster here, Tyler, Bam, Jimmy, and then you add one star, presumably, or maybe
pluck them off a roster. Just drop them on Miami's.
Bam, grab somebody, and who would it be? Would it be?
Just give me the best player. Give me Luka. Just give me Luka or Jokic.
Yeah,
one of those guys. Well, we got Bam already, so just give me Luka. Am I too? Is this too easy?
No, I know, because I'm sure people would probably disagree with us, but that's my thinking too. Like hearing the question, thinking like, man, I could just have one player taking crazy ass shots, making crazy ass passes, and just dominating and taking your team to a whole other level on a nightly basis. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Luka Doncic, and putting him on this roster, yeah, what a team that would be. He's just
they would be really
level. Good. Like, could you make an argument for, say, Anthony Edwards?
No, not right now. Unless for this, we're just talking about go win a championship right now. Like you could make an argument for Ant for like you want to start a franchise, but that's not really what the question is. It's just like 1 year, go win it.
What about Jokic? What about Jokic if you can have like Bam slide into your Aaron Gordon type of role, and then you have Jokic?
Sign me up. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the argument. Is it Doncic or Jokic? Yeah. And you're overlooking Embiid or Giannis or anybody else like that. Okay.
Those are the two best guys in the league right now. And maybe I'm prisoner of the moment. I kind of want Luka. The Heat already they're good at center with Bam, right? So the Jokic would obviously, I wouldn't say no to adding Jokic, but
no.
If I had to pick between the two, I feel like the bigger need on the roster is on the perimeter, and I would like to have Luka kind of shore that up. You could still have Terry Rozier play next to him. You then have Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jovic, I suppose, at power forward, hitting corner threes, doing the PJ Washington thing, and then you have Bam in the middle, anchoring that defense. That team's in the champ. That team's in the finals.
That's easy.
Yeah,
I think that's like dynasty. To be honest with you, even with Jimmy getting older, like Jimmy will take a less.
Okay, here's a new one. Because this one felt like a little easy. Were you with me, by the way? It's Jokic or Luka basically, and kind of miss me with these other. Okay.
I'm kind of, yeah, for sure.
Somebody who was not on an All NBA team. What if we limited it? Because like those are the easy ones, right? But if we could, is there a player that didn't make All NBA that you could drop? I mean, not Joel Embiid because of injury concerns, and I don't even know if that would necessarily do it. But I'm not going to count him anyway because he's generally an All NBA guy.
So who's that leave out there? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, so
Paul George.
Didn't he make it?
I don't think he did. But I'm not 100% certain. But that's what I'm trying to think between the players who missed time due to injury and whether
All right,
they were qualified or not.
let me list them. First team was Shea, Luka, Tatum, Giannis, Jokic. Second team was Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Kevin Durant, Kawhi, Anthony Davis. Third team was Devin Booker, Steph Curry, Tyrese Halliburton, LeBron James, and Domantas Sabonis. So Paul George is available. And I don't know that does it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
He's good. He would make the team better. He doesn't put them in the finals. Like that might
outside
not be
of the top 15. Yeah. Donovan didn't make it, right?
Donovan Mitchell did not make it.
He's available.
Yeah,
because he didn't qualify.
Because of
injury.
So
we're basically looking at Embiid, Donovan Mitchell, Paul George. In George's case, I don't think he was considered one of the top 15 players. I think you could have made that argument for Mitchell, but he didn't qualify due to the 65 game requirement.
I had him on my fake ballot over Devin Booker, but they were
Donovan Mitchell.
No, sorry, Paul George.
Paul George. Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't even feel really good about that. I kind of like that Booker made it. That feels better to me. Like De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Maxey, Kyrie Irving.
Yeah. No, I think I'd still lean Donovan Mitchell, to be honest with you. I mean, he's maybe, again, we're kind of focusing on this offseason, but I think he provides such a spark. And if you can keep this roster as currently constructed, you just add Mitchell to it within the confines of this question. Yeah, I think that works pretty well.
I'd go with that too. All right, next question. You guys made a good case for adding John Collins last year, but he stunk in Utah. Do you think he could experience a resurgence in Miami? Are there any other reclamation projects that might benefit from a dash of Heat culture? We'll start with John Collins. What do you think?
Did he stink in Utah? Yeah, he got a bad fit.
Yeah.
It wasn't great, maybe, but
it wasn't great. Stink is a little tough. That's a little harsh.
I think he would thrive here. I think with the same argument that we made last year still applies. Like the athleticism still there. I think the guy's just kind of broken, and like the idea of a change of scenery is a good one until you get to Utah. And it's like, is this the change of scenery I really need? And you're kind of stuck there in different lineups. And you're not quite sure of what your role is. And
yeah, I mean, there might be power forward and center, and he's not really right for any of those on their team. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be a little bit of what's going on between the ears at this point. And if that's the case, then he comes to Miami and he gets a sense of not Heat culture, but like stability, a clarity that he didn't get to have in Atlanta when he was viewed as the star of that team until Trae Young came along. Then it's like, oh, you're not really the star. You're kind of just backing up Trae here, really. And I think that's, if he's ready to embrace that, and I can't speak for him, and I don't know, he hasn't shown evidence that he's capable of it, but if he embraces that role as a supporting guy, I think he could absolutely thrive here because the tools are there. Like he can shoot, he can dunk. I mean, he can cut. Like there are a lot of things that he does well. I think he just needs to get the best out of him, and I think this is a team that has historically done a good job of that. So yes, I think he would thrive here.
Yeah, his best case scenario is a little bit of what PJ Washington has become in Dallas.
Yeah, exactly.
And the difference between PJ Washington and John Collins is PJ Washington makes half what John Collins makes or thereabout. Yeah. That's the problem, is he's making $26 million this year and the following year. So finding a way to add him to the roster would be tough. Like, would you trade Tyler Hero to Utah for John Collins and a couple of draft picks? You know,
I've seen some people suggest that, and they seem like comfortable with that. But again, Tyler has become so polarizing this offseason. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right move.
How much of an upgrade over Jovic is John Collins? I have no problem with adding depth. Like, you need depth at that position.
Sure.
But you're trading away a core part of your rotation in Tyler Hero for a markedly worse player. So I don't know. I mean, maybe if you're able to do that, get some draft picks that help you make that other move, maybe that's something that you explore. But not in terms of a 1-for-1. I don't know that I necessarily do that. In terms of other reclamation projects, I wrote this story.
It's interesting.
I wrote the. Do you have names?
I do, actually. I do. I'm actually looking at the list of free agents, and it's like this is almost. You could make a strong case. This is the reclamation free agency. Like there are a lot of names that you could say would bounce back here. Like I've got a couple. Longtime listeners know Dennis Smith Jr. I think is a guy like he just continues to win and make winning plays, and he just can't seem to get it right. In terms of what career choices he's made, he's had the opportunity to go to Miami twice, and he's not. And I think, again, he's the guy who could, maybe that'll work.
Let's play a game. Go do your list, and then I'll just go quick, like in or out.
Okay. Dario Saric.
In. Yeah. Minimum?
Gordon Hayward.
No. Out.
See, I think hearing Sam Presti say basically we sucked, we made a bad choice in taking you.
Yeah,
is going to light a fire
L on that one. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Like, he's just too competitive. Like, I know he's hurt and older, but still, like, the pride on these guys is so incomprehensible to the average person that I think it's going to light a fire. And I think
I hope
again,
it does. I like Gordon Hayward. Obviously, there's a history there between the Heat and Hayward, but
yes.
I wouldn't hate it, but he's not
right.
solving any major problems. And we already kind of did this with Kevin Love, and it worked. But how many more 35-year-old guys can you have on this roster?
What if you get shades of Boston Gordon Hayward? Nothing like what he was in Utah. That's not coming back. But if you get shades of what he was in Boston,
heck,
you add him to this roster.
I really didn't think he was that bad in
Charlotte,
right? But like based with the salary, it was no way.
But he was also missing time too. Like, and it was
he's injured all the time. But he's a connector piece. He always makes the right pass. He's bigger than people realized. A lot. He can play both forward spots. He can play power forward for this team in small ball lineups. Hits open threes. There's things that you like about him. And if he's on a minimum and you're not relying on him as a starter, where you already figure he's probably going to miss 20 to 25 games during the season anyway because of injuries and stuff, that's okay. I just don't know how much more. Like, to me, the availability is the problem. And you only have 15 roster spots. And in Miami, you really only have 14 roster spots because they never carry the 15th guy. So that's sort of why I'm like, I would rather get like 80 games of somebody young.
I wouldn't be at all surprised, though, if he uses that same competitive fire that I talked about. And considering the past link, I'm sure Pat Riley's already called him. Like, I really do think
I'm
that's
sure he
like
has not, David,
deal.
because that would be tampering. And I am positive that the Heat front office would never do that.
I mean, maybe just reaching out, like just to say, hey, not necessarily saying, would you like
maybe
to
they ran into each other at a Publix, maybe.
Yeah. Andre Drummond, that's another name on my list.
Yeah.
Bismack Biyombo.
I don't hate it.
The vibes are good. Jay Crowder returned to Miami.
No.
Really?
Washed.
I thought you would. Wow. Harsh.
Yeah. I would not say that to his face if he did come back to Miami. I would not in the locker room. Like, hey,
Boss Man 99 is not going to take that to
I always knew you had more in the tank, Jay. Don't listen to the June 2nd episode. I've got some second draft. Was that your list?
Yes, it was.
All right. So I wrote this thing on Real GM the other day about the Pacers and how they basically have built a quarter of their roster through second draft guys who are on rookie scale contracts that weren't exactly panning out in year one or year two with the team that drafted them. And the Pacers said, you know what? Your trash is our treasure. We think we can maximize this player in a way you didn't. Obi Toppin. Jalen Smith. Obviously, Tyrese Halliburton technically counts, and he's like the ultimate second draft guy. And there was one other player on their roster, but Aaron Nesmith was awesome for them and couldn't crack the rotation in Boston. So those to me are also sort of reclamation project adjacent,
Yeah.
So you look at a guy like Josh Giddey, not a fit for Miami because you need shooting, but I think he could be on the right team, a reclamation project. He's super talented. A lot of great stuff that you do want just doesn't necessarily work for what OKC's got going on right now. Other names that I got on my second draft options, all right? And we'll do the same thing where just give me an in or out.
Okay.
Johnny Davis, Wizards. That guy they drafted at 8. Yeah, out. We're out. Ousmane Dieng.
In, I guess?
Yeah, why not? Mark Williams.
In also?
Yeah, right? As a backup center, that feels like that would be nice. Jake LaRavia.
Ooh, out.
Dalen Terry, Chicago.
In.
Yeah, I like talking about him. I drafted him in a dynasty basketball league that I'm no longer a part of because I got bored. But wonder how he's doing. Davion Mitchell.
In for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know that Sacramento trades him anymore because of free agents that they got. Whatever.
Is he a restricted free agent? Is he a restricted free agent?
All these guys have at least a year left, and I think he has 1 year left. Zaire Williams.
Yes, right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would. Daron Sharp.
Yeah, I think so.
Good rebounder. Size.
Yeah, I think it works.
Marjan Beauchamp.
Oh, I don't know. I was high on him coming into the draft, and then he just hasn't been able to find a spot in Milwaukee. Just doesn't do
I kind of
anything
blame
well.
that on Doc Rivers a little bit
Way.
because he wants to play the vets.
You could use that. You could use that
to
a
me
lot.
is the definition of like he could be an Aaron Nesmith type, where it's like he hasn't shown literally anything, but with some good coaching and some structure and a role, I would take a flyer on him.
Okay.
My favorite.
Ironic, since apparently Milwaukee wants Haywood Highsmith now, so like high on their list. That would sting.
We'll do a swap. Jaden Ivey.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%, right? Feels like Detroit doesn't know what they have there. All right, that was my list.
No, it's a good list. It's a good list, and it's a good. Like I tend to think of, obviously from this exit, I tend to think of Reclamation being more older players or guys that are just like gone through injury and stuff like that. But you're right. Like there was a lot of players like you take a chance, you drafted them, we didn't have a fit for them. They didn't work out. Things change, timelines change, and they never kind of quite find their footing, and then they wind up blossoming in other teams. It's a great point.
And you get them in while they're still on their rookie scale contract, which is great
for
rights, two reasons, right? You get their bird rights, and they're also cheap right now. It's sort of like the rookie quarterback thing, where it's like, okay, and to bring this full circle, sort of, when we're having that tanking conversation, Miami doesn't really have access to these top tier lottery talents most of the time, right? Because they don't tank. Well, a way to get these guys, it's a little bit of like car off the lot stuff here, but these are still guys picked in the top 10 lottery talents. Like nobody, like they have some other issues going on. Nobody doubts that these guys are super talented. And if you're trying to just sort of increase the overall talent level of the roster, going and grabbing these guys is not a bad way to do it. And then next thing you know, it's like,
so show me the NBA Carfax though. Like I need to know what happened behind the scenes.
That would be a fun segment. Let's do the
NBA Carfax.
Sponsored by maybe them.
Yeah, who knows?
Come calling. All right, that'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast app.